This week's video on the city of Prague was requested by Glenn, generously donated and asked me to cover Prague, so very happy to do it. I did have a file, but he helped me, and Darren Jackson also helped me. Darren was involved with my town halls of Australia. He put together a PDF and I featured that, so you can check that video out as well. Prague is a pretty spectacular old world city that is becoming uglified with modern art in much the same way we saw in places like Ghent and Antwerp. So the theme continues as we look into more locations around the world. And I do like to provide historical population, not that I believe them, but Wikipedia shows us Prague moving forward. You can see the population relatively small. A lot of the older buildings, they'll say, were being built in this early time period here, and then of course a lot gets thrown up in the late 1800s, early 1900s, in and around here. A modern day population, 1.3 million. Spectacular city. It's obviously a tourist attraction for anyone who would be going to the area. Prague would be near the top of your list, I would think. So without further ado, let's check it out. So, as is often the case with these European cities, it's difficult to keep track of the architecture. I do have some pinned down for you, and we'll be looking at them with the architects and timelines and all the rest of it. Much of it will be a slideshow, just to give you a sense of the architecture that exists in Prague. And often the argument is given that Europe can't really have the same fake history as America. Some people are on board with the American fake history, North American, but they're just not ready to make that leap to this being a worldwide phenomenon. And I would suggest that it's most certainly the case. And the upheaval we've seen over the last 150 years has gone on pretty much everywhere you look. And you get this type of architecture in Prague, and you get a very similar symbolism as you will see in places all over North America as well. We've seen this type of thing in California. We've seen it in Germany with the people holding up the columns. The very ornate statuary and decoration going on here. And of course they'll tell us this is from the deep-rooted history and the changing of the guard of the royal lineages down through time. If you do a little bit of an investigation into the history of Prague, that's what you'll get. It changes hands from one royal to another. They tear down the castle, they build it again, all the rest of it. And it's, when you look at enough of these stories and enough of these different locations and see how much the narrative repeats, it really becomes obvious to see that you're looking at a cover story and that the history of the human race has been obscured and rewritten. These are all just examples of the architecture you're likely to find in Prague. Of course, you have the forts, which we're familiar with seeing again in North America. And I mentioned the ugly architecture or ugly modern art. This is an example of what I'm talking about. There's an eeriness that comes with a lot of the modern art that's being placed in a lot of these cities. This is just one example. We'll see more as we move forward. And this would be Prague Castle, and one of the cathedrals we'll be looking at as we move forward. Prague Castle is one of the reason for the city, basically. If you look into the history that we're given, they're going back 1,000 years, 1,200 years, And then anyone who knows anything about the distorted timeline and the work of Anatoly Fomenko will understand how much history has been inserted. So you really have to kind of throw it all out. Or you can believe the historians who make it up as they go along, as far as I'm concerned. This one looks to be a part of some sort of celebration in 1908. Anyone who can read any of this or knows any more about this, of course, throw that in the comment section below. I do apologize when I cover a lot of locations that I'm not familiar with or I don't speak the language. Even the postcards are hard to get any more information out of. And there was a World's Fair as well in Prague, and we'll be looking at one of the buildings from that as well. Just some more modern art for you before we move on. Again, that eeriness. Am I wrong? What do you think? Is there something about this modern art that rubs you the wrong way, like it does me? And I'm quite certain there is plenty of more old world architecture in Prague that I did not get to in this video, but I've done my best really to pick out the highlights. They have several of these bridge towers. Quite remarkable, the level of detail on this thing. Of course, we're always seeing what we consider to be Antiquitech, evidence that we had a previous civilization here that had some sort of relationship with the ether and an ability to harness energy to make the system go, if you will. And no shortage of monuments and stone bridges and all that. The infrastructure, again, the canals, the bridges. They always tell us that these are slave labor driven, but these things are bomb-proof a lot of the time. This is the astronomical clock. It's fairly famous in Prague. A lot of people in this field of research have taken a closer look at the astronomical clock, and possibly it's pointing to a more accurate depiction of the heavens and the way the heavens move. So I'm sure there's much more to that story as well. It's part of the town hall portion here. You can see it down below. Let's get into some of the architecture though. We have the National Museum. This one's built in between 1868 and 1891 by this Joseph Schultz. I feel like almost every architect was named Joseph that I could find from Prague. But you see the timeline now. If you're familiar with my videos, you'll know how many buildings were going up around the world in the late 1800s, we're being told. And I think this was, when they say the Industrial Revolution, I think this is just them attributing all of this architecture to a very short period of time, because that's the only place they can fit it in. But I think they made a mistake in doing that, because when you put it all together and you have the resources available to do the research, there's just too much for too short a period of time. This is some of the interior of that structure. It's also known as the Bohemian Museum. But in another location, it would have a different designation, not just a museum. You can just try to imagine a lot of this going together at a time when we're told that we didn't have power tools, electric lighting, or the infancy of electric lighting to try and achieve this type of architecture is it's very difficult to wrap your head around. This is the railway station, I believe, there. Bahnhof, Franz Josef Bahnhof. Again, this will be thrown right in that same timeline. I found a sanatorium. I wanted to show you that with the onion dome cupola. And I couldn't find the designation of this structure. Again, if anyone can read that, let me know what that is. Be interesting to know. I also came across some interesting postcards coming out of the early 1900s. Now, what was going on in the Czech Republic, or through the whole Soviet situation, the way they divided the world in half in about 100 years ago, I think it was a way to do these things with some form of cover, when one half of the world didn't know what the other half of the world was doing. But interestingly, they seem to be doing very similar things to the civilization and populations at the time. So I'll show you a few more of those postcards as we move forward. And some of these these buildings that I'm showing you in postcard form, I did find, and you'll see a little bit more detail moving forward. But I just wanted to show you some of these as well. And this is another one I couldn't find. Beautiful looking structure with the circular corners, the rounded corners, the little domes, and just this, again, the statuary, the detail, ornamentation is completely off the charts. And the cathedral again. There's another look at the Prague Castle complex with the cathedral. And I'm not sure if I finished my thought earlier, but this was supposedly the reason for the entire city to have developed was the existence of Prague Castle. They'll attribute this to, you can look it up, somebody, and then it gets rebuilt when another ruler takes over, and it's just absolutely absurd as far as I'm concerned. I put no faith in the conventional historical narrative. I'm sure you know if you follow my work here. More of these postcards, very interesting. Something going on. It really feels like there's brainwashing going on, very collective brainwashing going on. And I think again, that happened to everybody in different forms. This would be the National Theatre. We'll take a closer look at that as we move forward. This is a good view of the bridges and canal work. Again, at the level of construction, the degree of difficulty to construct all of this is absolutely ridiculous. This is interesting as well too. Some sort of power pole light, kind of unique looking. And another look at the canals, at embankments of the canals. I did find this one. I think we'll see it a little bit later. It's a mortgage bank. Yeah. That's how they did mortgage banks in Prague, apparently. This one I thought was interesting as well. Again, I don't understand what it's saying or implying, but there's something going on, some sort of deal with Woodrow Wilson. And if you look into any of the history of a lot of the American presidents and their affiliation with the gentlemen's clubs and associations, you have the torch right here. This story is sort of being interwoven worldwide, I think. And we only really have the illusion of these borders in many ways. This is the Charles Bridge. Now, this is what the bridge. One of the bridges I think I mentioned earlier. It got built and it got rebuilt. It's supposed to be about 1,000 years old. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but it's quite old. You can look it up. Charles Bridge in Prague, with all the statuary, and again the level of the degree of difficulty of the infrastructure there is pretty incredible. A children's hospital that went up in 1902, we're told. You could have told me this was built in the 1700s in Prague and I would have believed it, but apparently not. And we come to several churches. I'm sure I missed many churches. The Church of St. Cyril and Methodius, built in the 1700s, only took 6 years back then to build this. And take a look at the interior. Quite detailed, ornate. Every surface has some sort of way of catching your eye. It's amazing. And you have the rounded portion, a feat of engineering and architecture and construction to pull this type of thing off. Very high level construction going on here. Church of St. Loretto, built in the 1600s in only 5 years. It took to build this one. And it still stands in the modern day. You can see all the statuary in the front. Then you can have a nice peek at the interior as well, just to take a look at the level of detail. It's truly remarkable. The Church of the Virgin Mary, this one is called. And I don't know if you could have fit any more of these little, what do they call them? Dormer spires. Still stands. No doubt one of the major tourist attractions. And look at some of the interior as well. You've got very polished stone work going on here. Remember, built in the 1600s in 5 years. Colorado Mansfeldsky, I suppose, Palace. And just a quick look at the ceiling there. And apologies if you hear the dog barking in the background. It's a very hot summer day right now, and she's a little bit antsy. And just a general view of Prague. I did snap a couple of these in the surrounding area just to give you an idea of what these things are constructed with. You have a mixed medium going on here. You can clearly see the red brick on the coating, and you can see where the coating is gone, and it no longer looks like red brick for the most part, although it still looks quite red, and you're still looking like what appeared to be red brick. So are we looking at heat damaged infrastructure here? And you get a taste of the modern art, modern architecture, a bastardization, I suppose. Another look at that blending of mediums. But we'll keep moving forward. The municipal house. Now this is one I believe was built for the exposition. Let me look that up. One of the expositions they list is the General Land Centennial Exposition of 1891. And very similar storyline. Even the opening date and closing date, these all repeat no matter what cities you look at. Oh, millions of people came to look. Even built their own version of what we would call the Eiffel Tower, we're told. So we're looking at all old world infrastructure and a reset narrative. I found this interesting area as well. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. You can see it written here. And what looked to be some sort of melting going on around the wall structure here. Here's a closer look at it. Hard to really understand, make out what's going on there. And some people, skeptics, will say, no, that's just formed that way, made to look that way. I don't think so. I think this is a leftover of some sort of cataclysm that destroyed the material itself and turned it into this. Something similar I covered in Germany. There was a fountain. I can't remember what it was now. It's going a ways back in one of my videos, but very similar, reminding me of that. You have the Harold Orchards area, established in 1882, just to look at some of the architecture there. Again, 1880s. So we have to keep this in mind. We make the assumption that these are much older and they've been around much longer. But the historical narrative, and they probably have, but the historical narrative will tell us that so much of this was happening as the Industrial Revolution gained steam, if you'll pardon the pun. Very heavy Jewish contingent in the historical record in Prague. You'll see several synagogues. Let's say this one was built in 1906, probably just painted. And you look at some of the interior of that thing. Again, so over the top, ornate, absolutely ridiculous. And many buildings like this that I just could not find the name of, with the gate structure on top and all the rest of it. Ticking all the boxes, as I like to say. The lion's faces in the background, the statuary. And yet another building I could not find the designation of. Just all over the place, so much eye candy. We get to the Kinsky Palace. This one's built in 10 years, designed by this guy. We got a drawing of him. And this is the 1700s version of interior decorating in Prague. Only taking 10 years to construct all of this. Now, what were they making everything with? Hand tools, is what we'll be told. Hand tools and firelight. Sunlight and firelight to get all of this done. Doesn't look like it to me. They are technologies that have certainly been lost, hidden from us. And there's the train station, 1869 to 1871, so 2-year build time on this train station. Absolutely massive, meant to fit the timeline of trains coming into existence and becoming the prominent means of transportation. There it is in the modern day. And a peek at the interior in the 1860s and 70s in Prague. This is how they did it. Monuments to Emperor Franz. I'm not even going to try because I don't believe it. It looks like a piece of tech. Clearly, to my eye. And there we have again the municipal house. So it's a double up. And this one is built in 1905 to 1912. So not a part of that exposition I was speaking of earlier. But very recent in the narrative that they put this thing together. And that's what the interior looks like with the pipe organ. They're very in fashion to add a pipe organ to almost every structure, I guess, or they were part of the old world infrastructure. You can decide. The theory around the crowns is interesting as well. If you tie that in with the energies, the harnessing of the old world, and potentially have the crown being an individual receiver for etheric energy, there could be something to that. I don't think it's just decoration for rulers. The Museum of Decorative Arts, 2-year build time on this thing. So we got short build times, late 1800s. Yeah, we're right in that neighborhood. And this is the interior that they were able to pull off in that 2-year time period. Apparently. Difficult to believe. The National Theatre, you can see a little bit confusing here. There was a fire in 1881 when they were close to opening, so it delayed the opening. Despite that, it's still just 6 years to build this thing. And this thing is absolute jaw-dropper with all sorts of iconography and statuary that probably mean a whole lot more than we realize. The National Theatre. Absolutely tremendous structure. Overly ornate in detail. Wow. Look at this thing. No doubt this would be near the top of your list if you were going to Prague as well. To check out the National Theatre. The chariots seem to come into play quite a bit too. Chariots with winged creatures. And of course holding the wreath. The Victory Lady, as they say. Much more to that. No shortage of decoration in that 2-year time period. Or in that 6-year time period, sorry. And you jump to the modern architecture. This is the National Library. Looking like it's some sort of cartoon character that just plopped down in the middle of old world Prague. Let's go back to the theater, National Theater. And I've jumped around a bit here. This is St. Peter and Paul Basilica. We will see that a little bit more. Probably should have cleaned up my file a little bit. Apologies for that. Some more of the modern art / architecture. Yet another opera house. This one is built by, can't quite make it out here, but Ferdinand Helmer and, I can't quite make it out, sorry. Helmer and Felmer. I did a video on these two gentlemen, and they were the opera house specialists. They're pumping out opera houses in short periods of time. As you can see here, this one's built in 20 months, we're told. Yeah, you should check that out if you're interested in this narrative. This is a complete fabrication. These two gentlemen and the story behind them, as far as I'm concerned, is a complete fabrication. Now, because there's several theaters and opera houses, it's difficult to discern which is which. So I have a few here. I'm not sure which one we're looking at, but they're either way, they're both worth a closer look. That's for sure, especially when they tell us they were designed in such short time periods. So there's the mortgage bank I was talking about. This is built in 1890. All fitting into that nice little short time period. Hate to say it over and over, but it seems to keep popping up. This is the tower, Powder Tower, this one. Supposedly built in 1475. Obviously a landmark in Prague. And I did look for a Great Fire narrative, but I couldn't find it. I found some strangeness about people being thrown out of windows. The defenestration, I think they called it. It happened several times in Prague's history where they didn't like the city officials, so they got thrown out of windows. I thought that was a little bit strange. You can get one of these old views of Prague, what it was supposed to have looked at like back several hundred years ago. But I think what they do is to make a lot of these fit the narrative, and I don't think these are as old as they say they are. I think there's been a lot of fakery going on down through the years. And if you find that surprising or shocking, I think it's really no mystery that there have been forces behind the forces in control of this place, and they really make sure of what we learn is what they want us to learn. This is the old synagogue, supposedly the oldest in the world, we're told. Doesn't look like a whole lot on the outside. I thought I had an image of it. Apparently I don't. Here's some brutalist architecture standing next to the National Theatre for a sense of contrast. I jumped to this one. This was Prague Castle, inside the Prague Castle, so we're on to that now. Some more images of the Cathedral in Prague Castle with its pipe organ. There we go. Very easy to construct. All over Europe these things are. Looks like an engine of some sort, but probably no longer running. Let's keep moving forward. The Rudolfinum, another Joseph, like I mentioned earlier. This one they completed in 1885, we're told. Busy times, pipe organs, of course. High ceilings, pipe organs, highly decorated high ceilings. And there's the Saints Peter and Paul Basilica, which came up earlier. You can see this is 1885 to 1903, all in that same time period. Now, they could have told me that this was built over a span of 200 years, 500 years ago, 600 years ago, and that would have fit as well. Now, this character is interesting, Joseph Mocker. I found it very interesting that this man's name was Joseph Mocker. Apparently responsible for all sorts of reconstructions in the area. Now, you tell me, are they making a mockery of us? Or did this gentleman reconstruct all of these structures? Well, if he didn't, then this is the type of stuff they were doing in the late 1800s in Prague, as well as pretty much everywhere else I've looked at. It looks like the statues here have been removed. Room for statues without statues, and here in the arches. It makes you wonder, perhaps, what was there. It's still the St. Peter and St. Paul Basilica. Sanatorium, not the same one we saw earlier, so this would be a different one. And, you know, when you get into the dark underbelly of what happened in the past, you make you wonder when you see modern art like this, what was that all about? What are they trying to tell us when they make these structures and put them on our streets, in amongst the ruins and the repurposed structures of the old world? They're trying to tell us that, I'll leave that up to you. Here's the inside of the synagogue, Spanish synagogue, not the same one, so no shortage of synagogues. Just the level of detail again, I think, on display. There he is again, the Mocker Basilica of St. Ludmila, built 1888-92. This is a 4-year build time on this one. That's all it took to build, 4 years. And there it is again. 4 years. There he is. This is supposed to be a statue of the Mocker himself, and I think they do this. I've seen this in the Woolworth building as well. In New York, the statues of the supposed architects. What is this gentleman holding in his hand? Looks like a compass to me. And if you know, you know. The narrative repeats no matter where you look. This is the interior of the 2-year build time. Let me go back. Sorry, 4 years to build this. The Mocker himself. Okay. That's enough of that. Very unbelievable. 4 years, folks. Certainly makes you feel small as a construction worker in the modern day. And I think that's part of it, is to make us feel small. The St. Nicholas Church. You can see the timeline here. And see that this one took them, supposedly, 80 years to construct. And here's some of the interior for you. Just over the top. Unbelievable. It's hard to even fathom how these were constructed. This looks to be stone. All of this looks to be stone that's been milled. Truly remarkable. What's being depicted here? Got a lion's head in the middle. Not sure. I think there are a lot of stories in these walls that we don't have any context for. Except for the one that we've been given. I think there's much more to the story. So we get to the St. Vitus Cathedral. Part of the castle, I believe. Look at the timeline on this. Again, Mocker gets to be the one to close the deal on it, apparently. They always give us built, rebuilt, reconstructed, renovated over the years, and final product after Mocker gets his hands on it is the St. Vitus Cathedral. And we saw this one earlier. I'll keep moving. I certainly don't want to make light of all these magnificent structures, but I do want to get it all in a reasonable time frame for you. The St. Vitus Cathedral. Looking like certainly some sort of harmonic resonator of some sort. The Strahov Monastery. You can see the early time frame on this. Remember Prague, not a lot of people, supposedly, well, the first census is 4,000 people in 1250. So 100 years before that, they're building the Strahov Monastery. I'm sure it's just a bunch of monks and elbow grease. Very famous for its library, the Strahov Monastery Library. And what's been placed in front of us here? Yes, 3 globes, 4, 5 globes. And there's a close connection with Johann Kepler and a lot of the implementation of the heliocentric system and Prague. So you can make of that what you will. But if you're not questioning the shape of the place we live, I don't know what to tell you, folks. The narrative is on thin ice at this point. Thin ice. More Strahov Monastery for you. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I believe it's connected to the university, Charles University. We've gone back to the synagogue now. There's the synagogue in the foreground, and another beautiful structure in the background with a little bit of tech on top. The Tabor Gate, and again showing you a nice display of the mixed mediums, and then some people will say these are repairs from damage. Maybe some of it, yeah, but I think there's more to the story here as well, and seems a bit strange. So I wanted to show that, having a lot of that star fort feel with the corners buttressed out like this. The Church of Our Lady before Tin. We saw this one earlier, but here's the narrative, 1350 to 1511, so 160 years to build this one. Obviously a tourist attraction, very prominent on the skyline with all of those pointy bits, if you will. There's a nice close-up of the upper reaches of this place, Our Lady of Tyne, before Tyne. Very interesting. There you have the ball, spire, and a quick look at the interior. No doubt, to my mind, that all this has been whitewashed up here. I'm sure there used to be much more detail than we see in the modern day. The Clementinium Library, opened in 1722. Confusing. Is it the same library? It might be. Yes, it is. So part of the Strahov Monastery. Apologies for showing that twice, but it's probably worth showing twice. There's the Petrin Tower that I mentioned earlier, built in 1891 for that exhibition, Jubilee Exposition. And it still stands, although, yeah, looks like it's in very similar condition to what it was back in 1891. Probably long before that. The Royal Garden, all of this founded in 1534. Royal implying royalty, of course. Royalty have their paws on everything. They want us to believe that they've had control and power over us for a very long time. I don't believe that story. A lot of people say that these evil forces have controlled us for thousands of years. I completely disagree with that. I think we're looking at a very short window, maybe just a little season. Alright, the Till Theatre, 1781 to 83, 2-year build time on that thing in the 1700s. Just a quick look at the interior, really important to the performing arts in the old world. And I'd just like to give you a sense of the street scenes again. Of course, the streetcars, all par for the course. It's like one person invented them and all of a sudden everybody wanted them. And they were everywhere, almost all at the same time. There's a very, very thin backstory on the streetcar narrative in our history. So this is the Vicerad. And I thought this one was interesting because if you look here in the foreground, you've definitely got some blending going on here again, implying potentially some sort of high heat cataclysmic event affected certain areas of Prague. These also kind of look burnt out. A lot of these cathedrals look a bit burnt out. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, certainly. And I hate to do it to you, but I will close on a little bit more of the modern art for you that is now sweeping Europe and Prague and attempting to cover up the old world architecture, which we will not let happen. So thank you again to Glenn for your generous donation and pointing me in the direction of Prague, and to Darren for providing some visuals. And I just want to remind everybody that my third book on demolished buildings in Old World North America has been released. I just received my copy in the mail today, and I'm quite happy with the quality. I did upgrade the paper quality, so they're a bit glossier than my previous two volumes. So if you're interested in this content, this is a way to have these stories and have these visuals tangible right in front of you. So I appreciate you being here. I'll see you next time. This has been an Old World exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.